Penn State Wrestling is expected to take another team title, several wrestlers competing for individual titles, but Oklahoma State expects to do the exact same thing.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
That is right. You are locked on to Penn State and Oklahoma State Wrestling, and thank you so much for checking out this Locked On Crossover. My name is Zack Seyko, and I'm the host of Locked On Nittany Lions. He is Cody Stovall, the host of Locked On Oklahoma State, and this is a season preview. We are going to talk about expectations because Oklahoma State is ranked as a team that maybe they finish outside the top 5, but no, David Taylor in year 2, they fully expect to be right in the middle of it, possibly, Penn State's, at a different level, which we will talk about here, but to be significantly behind Nebraska, Iowa State, no, that's not on the table for Oklahoma State here. So let's begin with our expectations, Cody. So for Penn State, it's to make more history. The dual meet streak that Oklahoma State actually holds, they're chasing a piece of history that the Cowboys have right now. It's that consecutive dual meet win total. And to get to 77, they would wrestle Stanford over at the collegiate duels. But then on top of that, they're trying to chase the points record again. They're trying to get the not only individual champions, but finalists. In order to get to that scoring title, you're going to need potentially 5 or 6 individual champions. And Penn State, I think, has 8 title contenders, which legitimately, I'm not saying that it's likely, but I'm also here to say that it's not impossible either. But I'm eager to hear your side of things because Oklahoma State takes, at least from my point of view, and a lot of a lot of people that follow this sport say that the Cowboys are going to take a step back in year 2 under David Taylor. You say no.
No, I don't think so at all. Matter of fact, I think at the end of the day, you could consider us stepping up. Are we going to beat Penn State? No, but I do think that this roster that David Taylor has now with multiple years of development from some of these individuals, and then you take into consideration somebody like Connor Doucette, who's been training with Wyatt Hendrickson for well over a year and a half now, Zahid Valencia, all of the Robin Bravo Young, that RTC program has Oklahoma State in prime position to do something pretty spectacular. You just saw Casey Swiderski make some things happen in the All-Star Classic. Obviously, you got to see the former Penn State Nittany Lion bring home a title as well. This is a lot of excitement surrounding Oklahoma State because David Taylor did probably more than we had anticipated in year 1. So the excitement level has to tick up whenever you have a very, very good transfer portal and you did very, very good in the recruiting landscape, so much so that you're already having upsets like Cody Merrill. Cody Merrill gets upset by Ben Mower in the rankings match. Nobody had that on their bingo card. And I think that accentuates the fact that Oklahoma State's backup wrestlers would start at most other programs in the country. So the starters are going to be prepared to make a deep run this season, deeper than Nebraska, Iowa, and Iowa State.
And that's interesting because when you look at the initial rankings, again, I refer to Intermat a ton, but it's not incorrect to refer to Flo or anybody else. But Penn State is the clear and above favorite above everybody else. Then it's Nebraska, who's kind of expected to be that number 2 team with Iowa State, Iowa, NC State as threats. And then this is where I would at least initially group Oklahoma State together with an Ohio State and a Lehigh as these dark horse players that could certainly disrupt the flow of everything if they're peaking at the right time. It's a lot of newness for Oklahoma State, right? They didn't get to build through the transfer portal as much. They still did. Don't get me wrong. Casey Swiderski, Alex Facundo, Richie Figueroa. But when you land a Wyatt Hendrickson type, right? That's what I'm referring to is you still have a lot of... You have a lot of unknown, right? Facundo, is he going to be a true national title contender? Swiderski seems to be that iteration of a Wyatt Hendrickson type of wrestler to go and challenge and disrupt everything at 149. But when you have, and then you return a Tegan Jamison and a Troy Spratley. So looking at those rankings, it's hard for me to, I know that's where they are right now. But I kind of agree with you that they're poised to, if D. Lockett can take a step forward, right? If someone like Teague Travis continues to build upon what he did late last season, that this Oklahoma State team, it's going to be defined by the youngsters being able to take that step forward. So your Connor Doucette, D. Lockett, Cody Merrill, they're not weak links, but how much leverage do they give this Oklahoma State team in the postseason?
No, you're 100% right. Yeah, we didn't necessarily go out and get a massive multi-year All-American heavy hitter other than maybe Richie Figs. But Richie Figs is at a different weight class. He's coming off of a season that wasn't very spectacular last year at Arizona State. It almost feels like he caught lightning in a pan when he won his national title. And I do think that if somebody can unlock another level, it is definitely going to be a David Taylor. Again, we're going to give respect where respect is due. The Penn State model that David Taylor has brought to Stillwater is precisely why we feel like we're on the precipice of doing something pretty spectacular. As we discussed last season, the next 2 years was always going to be Penn State's. But 2027, 2028, that seems to be the opening for Oklahoma State. And in order for that to be realistic, we have to prove it this season. I'm just so enamored by the developmental aspect of Oklahoma State because John Smith was the most legendary coach of all time. Obviously, Cael Sanderson is doing his damnedest to make a case for himself. But the developmental side of things at one point in time kind of stopped existing in Stillwater. And we needed this massive injection in RTC because we were not a point scoring team. That wasn't John Smith's thing. So this transcendent period kicked off very, very quickly. So if season 1 gives you hope, season 2 gives you a ton of hopium.
And I think that's what a lot of people are just expecting because David Taylor shattered expectations initially in year 1, that now you get to a situation where, oh, well, it can't be this good again this quickly. And I'm here to say maybe. I'm here to say that it would not shock me if Oklahoma State finishes within the top 3. It's just going to be tougher to do when you see the changes again. Lehigh getting stronger again. Ohio State, I will always continue to look at Ohio State as a team that's just waiting to explode. Okay, there's just a lot of young talent that's finally starting to get into its prime. And it's going to be interesting for Penn State to, I want to provide the Penn State perspective here as well, to face teams like Ohio State and, of course, Iowa within the Big Ten before you get to see some of these other teams in the postseason. You get those challenges from Lehigh in a head-to-head, Ohio State and Iowa and Nebraska, all consecutively, actually, at the end of the season for Penn State before they get to the Big Ten tournament and then NCAAs, which they do host this season. So Penn State. Now, Cody, we're gonna tease this at first and then talk about it more in the upcoming segment here. How many individuals can you say, yep, this guy is a title contender? Above all, at a very minimum, this guy is going to be in the mix regardless. From Penn State's side of things, I would say 8. And then Aaron Nagel, Braden Davis, they're battling at 141. Hey, they both finished top 5 once upon a time, even though that class is pretty stacked at 141. So I'd say it's safe to say that Penn State has 8 title contenders.
The safe bet for Oklahoma State, I would say, would be like 3. Troy Spratley obviously is going to factor into that. The Connor Doucette is primed to have a massive season. Casey Swiderski, he's somewhere in that top 2-3 range. Yes. And then is Facundo going to have the freestyle, the folk style kind of emergence this season? If so, he could fall in that classification. We just saw what Zack Ryder did. Zack Ryder was the most impressive wrestler at the All-Star Classic. And I think that is a little glimpse behind some other options. I would say 3 for sure. Troy Spratley, Connor Doucette, Casey Swiderski. But the potential of 5 or 6 is there. And again, before we get to segment 2, I will say, out of all the teams you just mentioned, I will say that I think that Penn State and Oklahoma State have one thing that Nebraska and not even Iowa has to offer, and that is the competitive balance inside the locker room. If you know your number 3 wrestler is good enough to compete with your number 1 wrestler, who's probably good enough to be an All-American, you're going to have something that nobody else can provide.
8 title contenders, and then maybe in a sneaky way, 6 for Oklahoma State. Let's break it down more and then talk about now that the dust is actually settled and guys are now wrestling for their respective programs. Penn State has Rocco Welsh. Oklahoma State has Zack Ryder. You make a good point. Both of those guys could actually meet in a potential NCAA final. We're going to discuss that more coming up next here on this Locked On Crossover. And this episode is brought to you by Game Time. We all love college football. We couldn't be more excited about it. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands. There's just nothing else like it. But let's be real. actually getting tickets can feel more like a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. That's why you should use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. You can pull up Game Time, and in just a couple of taps, you'll see amazing deals. I'm talking about your favorite college football games, college sporting events, for as low as $25. Another great feature, if you've never been to a stadium or a venue, Game Time gives you a point of view feature, so you're not second guessing yourself when you're buying tickets. You can see ahead of time what it's going to look like from those selected seats. So take the guesswork out of buying college tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. So Penn State and Oklahoma State could have a few head-to-head battles, which I'd be obviously extremely eager to see. I'm thinking Luke Lilledahl and Troy Spratley at 125. Who knows at 133? Again, it's about Richie Figueroa getting back to that point because he did win an NCAA title, but he certainly had a bit of a drop-off. That's also easy to admit. And Marcus Blaze is certainly in the mix to win a national championship. Both of them are, right? Respectively. Yeah. And then 149, it seems like it's going to be a crash course there with Shayne Van Ness and Casey Swiderski. At 184, where all the drama and everything, the off-season conversations, Rocco Welsh going into the portal, and then Penn State. Well, why would Penn State want Rocco Welsh? Well, then it really complicates things because, yes, Zack Ryder was there. There was at least, I had heard a rumor that Josh Barr could potentially cut down to 184. That's kind of here and there. That's gone and done and over with. But now you have Rocco Welsh at 84 at Penn State. And then Zack Ryder, I don't blame him for feeling some type of way. If I'm supposed to be the guy in waiting at 84, why are you going and recruiting another guy out of the transfer portal who could come in and potentially take my spot? I guess that's the adage that Penn State has, is that nothing's safe, nothing's guaranteed within this Penn State wrestling lineup. And then Ryder, who has connections previously to David Taylor because of training at M2, what he did his senior season out of high school. So that makes a ton of sense. And now we're here. Zack Ryder looks like a national title contender. Don't think of him, oh, well, he still has to get going. I know there's not many people that think that way now, but we could very well see a Rocco Welsh versus Zack Ryder NCAA final, maybe at a minimum a semifinal.
Dude, I tell you, out of everybody on the roster that is a somewhat recent acquisition by David Taylor, I think Zack Ryder might have the most reminiscent career to Dean Hemedy Jr. When Dean came in last year, he was not the ankle pick king. That was something that he learned to master in an offseason with David Taylor. I think that Zack Ryder's had multiple years now with David Taylor. So if anybody's going to have a season much like Dean Hemedy this previous year, it's got to be Zack Ryder. They have that cohesiveness. They have that connection. And if I'm sure you watched the All-Star Classic, Zack Ryder was moving at a different level. He could pick apart his opponents and do basically whatever he wanted against All-American level dudes. I think that of everybody else on the roster, he's probably the one out here to prove the most, other than maybe Richie Figs.
That's very well said. And at 184, just specifically, I mean, Max McAnally, it's so top heavy with McAnally, with Welsh, with Ferrari, with Ryder. I'm not gonna count out an Aiden Sinclair over at Missouri. I like what he did on the freestyle circuit. So 184 is going to be the most entertaining because it is truly a roulette wheel of which of those four, and honestly, I'd say 5 with Sinclair. I think he'll be peaking at the right time. Those other matchups, though, Shayne Van Ness is going to be the odds-on favorite for the most part now because Caleb Henson takes that strategic red shirt over at Virginia Tech. So it's really, if anybody else other than Shayne Van Ness or Casey Swiderski wins at 149, I would be surprised, Cody.
Well, and you mentioned Casey Swiderski. I think that the evolutionary process he's about to go through is going to be worth its weight in gold because Casey Swiderski was a little bit of a hothead at Iowa State, right? All-American level dude, obviously has some massive top 5, top 10 wins already early in his career. But even there was a match a couple of years ago against Oklahoma State. He was just, he was a hothead, right? And so he was probably the riskiest individual that David Taylor picked up. But if he can convert that wild child side into a technical, masterful individual, then I think he easily could be the guy that takes the whole thing home.
So there's just some interesting crossover there between Penn State and Oklahoma State for obvious reasons. Let's bring in some concerns here, because you seem fairly optimistic, and I buy into that too, because I think when David Taylor's taking a page out of what he experienced at Penn State, the playbook that Cael Sanderson runs, it's about ramping up the season and get them peaking at that point for the postseason. So you might see guys struggle, and it's like, well, why are you confident in them? Because they're struggling right now, or they haven't shown quite enough at this point in time. Yet they're peaking when it matters the most. And that's what's going to be key there. So where do the concerns lie? Because for Penn State, I think it's easy to kind of point it out. At 141, you don't have that true anchor between Aaron Nagao and Braden Davis. Those guys offer upside. They offer podium potential. I think this more has to do with Jesse Mendez rather than it's not about what Nagao and Davis are not. It's about what Brock Hardy and Jesse Mendez are, just at the top of that 141-pound weight class. And then at heavyweight, I'm glad that you have so much confidence in someone like Connor Doucette, because I look at the heavyweight class, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, Wyatt Hendrickson's not there. Gable Stevenson's not there. This class flips over and it's anybody's. And then, younger Bastida comes back, and AJ Ferrari bulks up and he looks great. Tay Gadiali transfers over to Michigan. And then Isaac Trumbull comes back for NC State. Ben Keeter of Iowa. Nick Feldman of Ohio State. Nathan Taylor of Lehigh. And it's just, and then I name people like Luke Luffman at Illinois, Connor Doucette at Oklahoma State. And it's just, if Cole Mirasola or Lucas Cochran, who bulks up to heavyweight, it's not even guaranteed that you get on the podium in that weight class. So when you mentioned Connor Doucette being potentially a title contender, I mean, I think there's a wide range of outcomes there where he could be close to the final or also not make the top 8.
Absolutely. Well, and even last year, though, whenever he wrestled unattached, if I recall correctly, he was like 9-1 wrestling unattached. So he's been just waiting in the wings. And again, I think that Wyatt Hendrickson still being in the building and still being heavily involved,
that helps.
It's going to be absolutely massive for him.
Yeah, that helps. I mean, that helps a ton. That's a positive influence, that somebody who's lived it and experienced it, doing it against all the odds, right? Who gave him you did, actually. You gave him a fighter's chance against Gable Steveson, but 99% of other people said that there's just no way. Gable Steveson just reigns supreme here. It's his weight class until he vacates it, and Wyatt Hendrickson had to say otherwise. So he's lived that blueprint and can pass that on to Connor Doucette. Again, when David Taylor's your head coach, there's a lot of outcomes that you aren't expecting to happen, could happen. Tell me about D. Lockett a little bit. You mentioned concerns, and so we'll roll right into D. Lockett. The biggest concern, I think, for Oklahoma State is the fear of the unknown. The only wrestler that we know precisely what he's going to provide is Troy Spratley. Outside of that, it's kind of a crapshoot, right? We talk about Richard Figueroa. Is he going to go to the national title version? Yeah. Or is he going to be, a transcendent guy or not? Like we have no idea. We don't know exactly what we're going to get out of 157. You have a ranked Teague Travis, but then you also have Landon Rabadou that is already right there because he beat him in a ranking match. And then Tegan Jameson is injured. So is Sergio Vega going to step up to the plate? Or is Carter Young, another ranked individual, going to be able to leapfrog Sergio Vega? There's so much unknown that the roster could change a decent amount throughout the course of the season. It would seem somewhat unfathomable since we do have a decent number of ranked dudes. But I think the fear of the unknown is the biggest question mark. Again, I mentioned Cody Merrill. Cody Merrill's poised to have an absolutely massive season, and then he gets upset in the rankings by Ben Mower. That came literally out of nowhere. Ben Mower was really good at Edmond Memorial High School, but his senior record was like 34-5. He didn't win a state title. Yeah. So that development, again, it's exciting, but it also is cause for concern because our starters could get bumped at any point in time in the season, and that could create chaos. And I know the preference is that they would want to redshirt some of those guys like a Vega, maybe not necessarily a D Lockett just because he comes in and he's probably your best option at 165. But ideally, you know, Penn State's kind of dealing with that too, where you could benefit from redshirting Marcus Blaze, but you're probably not going to. You could benefit from redshirting PJ Duke, but actually you're probably not going to. So we'll continue with this conversation on the other side of this break where, what about the other teams? You know, Iowa State, Nebraska, who's going to pose to be the biggest threat to either squad here, and other lineup talk? That's coming up next here on this Locked On Crossover. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at an even bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets. That's right, $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head on over to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. And remember, new customers will get $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Penn State's going to be at the top, and it truly is a race for second. You know, I'm fully expecting Penn State to win a fifth NCAA title. It to be determined about how many finalists do they get, how many individual champions do they get, because I think Penn State actually somewhat underwhelmed last season. I mean, I know they did when they got, I know they broke the scoring record, and Cody, I see your reaction, but they only got 3 finalists into the, and Mitchell Messenbrink and Carter Starachi were the only ones to win, you know. So granted, you had Carter get his 5th individual NCAA title, which will, I don't think will ever be achieved again in history. Well past our time, right? If something changes there. But with respect to that, you know, Penn State, the expectation was, hey, you have 6 or 7 that could end up being finalists, and you only end up with 3, right? You have Levi Haynes losing to Dean Hamady and falling into, but then they rallied. Tyler Casack rallied, and Levi Haynes rallied to take 3rd place. Same thing with Luke Lilledahl. So now it's, do you see those guys right those wrongs? Okay, so Luke Lilledahl is going to look to capture his first NCAA title. You're going to want to see Levi Haynes, who is the odds-on favorite at 174. And it's going to be difficult to do when you have, you know, hey, there's individuals at all of those other programs that I mentioned, at Iowa. Iowa State being Intermat's preseason 3rd-ranked team was a little bit surprising to me. You know, hey, Nebraska's there, Oklahoma State. When I say I'm a big fan of Ohio State, it's for respect of how they just continue to build this lineup. I love the way that Coach Ryan builds this lineup, and I'm just waiting for them to peak. I think it's going to happen this season, where that's a team that, hey, Oklahoma State, they should be concerned with Iowa. They should be concerned with Iowa State, but Ohio State very well could be peaking in March, and then you got to worry about them stealing one of those top 3 spots.
Yeah, I think the timing of a lot of these duels are going to be pretty important. I think the national duels, even though there's a team excluded,
we got to talk about that too.
I do think that is going to give a very good understanding of where a lot of these individuals are, because there's a ton of heavy hitting teams that are going to be in that event. And whenever you have guys like the Oklahoma States and the Nebraskas, and I think Virginia Tech obviously is going to have an argument at some point in time here in the future, we're counting on chaos. So let me ask you, what kind of chaos would it take for Penn State not to win the title? I don't think there's any chance, but what would it take for Penn State to get clipped by Oklahoma State or Nebraska, Iowa State, Iowa, Lehigh? A bunch of injuries? Is that really the only thing that would kind of derail Penn State this season?
I mean, that's the first thing that comes to mind is injuries, unfortunately. But Penn State does have the depth, right? I could make the argument that they might have the 2 best wrestlers at 157 pounds in the country. They're both at State College with Tyler Casack and PJ Duke. You could make the argument that might be the case at 197 with Josh Barr and Connor Mirasola. Again, the only question marks that I have are at 141 and heavyweight in terms of their upside, but I know what their floor is. So 141, okay, you have Aaron Nagel and Braden Davis. That's 2 All-Americans. One of them is going to be a backup. So if you get an unfortunate injury, you have a guy that's waiting in the wings that will pick that up. Who's better at the end of the day? Well, the winner of that head-to-head match. Okay, you have other wrestlers like Joe Seeley, who was a one of the top pound for pound recruits in the country from the class of 2024, and he's just biding his time. He could go in at 157 if need be. He could go in at 165, and that's what's so critical for Penn State maintaining its longevity is you don't have to force somebody out there for every single dual meet if they're not 110%. Okay, so if they are dealing with some bumps and bruises, if they are dealing with an illness, you got a guy that's ready to go that can pick you up a dual mate victory and probably some bonus points in that moment. So Josh Barr, who picked up a potential injury, it doesn't sound like it's too serious, but when he was out for the senior competition on the freestyle circuit, he ends up getting hurt and doesn't medal. And it's like, oh, this is, the season starting. This is a huge concern. Well, it is because it's Josh Barr, but it's not in the scheme of the lineup because Connor Mirasola can wrestle for a couple of weeks, a couple of months, whenever Josh Barr is ready. And I can't say the same that's the case for a lot of other programs. And that's where Penn State really separates itself right now.
I absolutely love that answer. And I will admit that wrestling may be one of the few sports, maybe the only sport that the transfer portal actually makes every single duel much, much bigger.
Yeah.
Just the storylines, right? You got Alex Facundo, you got Zack Ryder. What are they going to do if they meet up against a Nittany Lion at some point in time? You've got the Angelo Ferrari madness that happened last year, the disrespect of Dustin Plott. That's going to be paid attention to. Whenever you go to Nebraska, not only is that the team that finished above you last season in the points total, but that's also where AJ Ferrari ended up. And there will always be bad blood between AJ Ferrari and Oklahoma State for a multitude of reasons. But I love the fact that wrestling has these storylines that are built in. It's almost like a WWE kind of thing. You have the good guy and you have the heel. We just don't know who the good guys and who the heels are going to be. And I find that so exciting as it pertains to other teams to pay attention to. It is plausible that Iowa State wins the Big 12 title. Like that is a real plausible thing that could happen. And honestly, if they had Casey Swiderski, I would almost maybe even sign off on them being the team to get it done this year. But I do think that the storylines make matchups, and the matchups will dictate what happens at nationals at the end of the season. But we get to take on Iowa. We get to take on Stanford. We get to take on Nebraska. We get to take on Iowa State. This is a ton of fun. And the Big Ten is pretty loaded. You already mentioned Ohio State. Obviously, Penn State carries a huge stick. Nebraska's there. The storylines in wrestling are growing. I love that the sport of wrestling is growing. And I do love that Wyatt Henderson, what he did last season, that raised the bar from a viewership standpoint.
Yeah.
And it's probably the only sport where the portal actually does what it's supposed to do. And it gives you these things that build the excitement. There's now marketability in college wrestling. Because again, whenever we go take on Nebraska, if there's back and forth between Connor Doucette and AJ Ferrari, and I figure there very well could be, that builds up even more of a matchup. And it's going to be more television, more eyeballs. I freaking love it, dude. What a great time to be invested from Oklahoma State's perspective after laying dormant for the better part of almost a decade. And thanks to you guys, we have something to chase. Everybody was chasing us for 60 years. Now everybody is chasing you. And as you mentioned, you're trying to put up a bigger points total. You're trying to beat what you did last year, so you keep breaking records while stacking back-to-back natties. So if Oklahoma State and Nebraska and whomever else does catch Penn State in the next few years, y'all have built something so masterful that it's going to be hard for anybody to replicate. Other than, I think Oklahoma State's the only brand that could fill the shoes of what Penn State's done over the last 12 years.
Well, and Iowa's supposed to be that too, which is why I think that in somewhat of a case, there's a little bit of spiraling going on, right? Their heads are spinning, and to a little bit of an extent, because it's Oklahoma State trying to and successfully doing it right now, leapfrogging Iowa in the process. Right. And then Nebraska's there. So they don't like, because it always used to be, at least recently, it was Penn State or Iowa, with Penn State winning more often than not. And now it's, you got Nebraska right there. Now we got to worry about them. You got Oklahoma State right there. Now we got to worry about them not only, defeating us, but using us as a stepping stone to get closer to Penn State. It's not just about Penn State, Iowa anymore. There's a couple other programs in the mix, and you would like to see more. You would like to see Ohio State. You would like to see Michigan, whomever else, right? Cornell, again, I could name anybody, but just somebody that continues to expand past, okay, it's Penn State. Yeah, there's Nebraska. Yeah, there's Oklahoma State. And then it's basically everybody else. So seeing Iowa State like this, seeing Iowa, still be strong, still try to make aggressive moves through the portal, respect to Nebraska, and then Oklahoma State being what it is at this point in time, with, again, some other teams like Lehigh, Ohio State, right? Stanford, they got some interesting individual wrestlers.
Man, Iowa's time may be coming to an end just because of that developmental aspect, right? That off-season RTC training style of program. Iowa behind the scenes has not really flourished much in that department. And
that's the intrigue, and that's why Penn State just had 7. And I think I said Josh Barr in the senior level. That was my mistake. U23. Penn State had 7 affiliated wrestlers on the U23 lineup. It's basically Penn State and Oklahoma State for these international lineups to represent the United States. There's no appeal with that when it comes to Iowa. Iowa State, even Nebraska. Okay, Antrell Taylor and Ridge Lovett tried, but it's not a consistent push to, hey, we do it in folk style, but we're going to dominate freestyle as well. So that's what you and I have in common covering these teams.
I love it, dude. I'm so flipping excited this season. Gallagher Iba's going to be rocking. And the battle for second is going to be epic, because this sets everything up for next season. I think next season we're going to have a real shot at finally clipping the Penn State wings.
I will say good luck with that, because Penn State still returns a majority of this prime lineup. There's not a lot of turnover there with the title contenders that are for this season. They lose one of them. So just a heads up that it's still going to be tough to do, but that's why we have these conversations, right?
That's right. Well, just argument's sake, Zach, you said it would be 2028 before somebody could pop up. Yes. I said 2027. I got to stick by my guns, man.
I don't blame you. He's Cody Stovall of Locked On Oklahoma State. My name is Zack Seyko of Locked On Nittany Lions. Thank you to each and every one of you for joining us on this crossover episode. We are going to do this all throughout the season. Talk about our respective teams, because wrestling, the sport, needs and deserves this kind of coverage on a consistent basis. So we will be able to bring that to you throughout this entire wrestling season. So subscribe to both YouTube channels and wherever you get your podcasts to keep up with Penn State wrestling and so much more, and Oklahoma State wrestling and so much more here on the Locked On Podcast Network.